At precisely 6:47 a.m., something unprecedented began unfolding on the outskirts of Moscow that would fundamentally alter the strategic military landscape. What happened over the next several hours represents a new form of warfare, one where victory isn't measured in territory captured or enemies eliminated, but in networks dismantled, sensors blinded, and command structures systematically unraveled. This wasn't a conventional military assault. This was a meticulously orchestrated multi-domain operation targeting one of Russia's most valuable military assets, the Borisogledsk II Electronic Warfare Center, a facility estimated to be worth $4.5 billion and critical to Moscow's regional defense architecture. By the time the operation concluded, this sophisticated installation had been effectively rendered blind, its command channels severed, its influence over the surrounding sensor network degraded to the point of near uselessness. The most remarkable aspect? Very few people outside military intelligence circles even know this happened. What you're about to discover is how modern warfare has evolved into something that would have seemed like science fiction just a decade ago. This is the story of an operation where the most devastating weapons weren't missiles or bombs, but electromagnetic frequencies, swarms of coordinated drones, and the systematic exploitation of digital vulnerabilities. This is warfare in the invisible spectrum, and it's more consequential than most people realize. The initial assault didn't announce itself with explosions or the roar of jet engines. Instead, it began with a coordinated probe by swarms of Ukrainian unmanned aerial vehicles approaching the facility from multiple vectors simultaneously. These weren't simple reconnaissance drones. This was a sophisticated mix of FPV-type loitering munitions and fixed-wing reconnaissance aircraft, each assigned specific tasks within the larger operational framework. The reported objective was audacious: map and systematically disrupt the digital infrastructure of a high-value radar and signals intelligence grid that formed the backbone of Moscow's regional sensor network. Specialized assets executed their assignments with surgical precision during this opening movement. Punisher strike drones conducted low-altitude passes specifically to map fiber optic corridors, the physical pathways through which the facility's data flowed. UJ-26 reconnaissance platforms traced critical uplink routes, identifying the digital arteries connecting the facility to the broader network. Other electronically equipped drone units were tasked with the most critical objective: locating the facility's central data core, the brain coordinating all operations. But here's what made this opening phase truly sophisticated. The drone swarm operated under protective escort. Ukrainian Su-27 fighters and attack helicopters maintained a defensive corridor, shielding the unmanned assets from interception while they completed their reconnaissance tasks. This wasn't a reckless gamble. It was a meticulously planned operation with layered redundancies. Simultaneously on the ground, Ukrainian reconnaissance elements initiated the electronic assault component. Ground-based robotic platforms, including Panther-type systems, advanced along tree lines to identify isolated relay towers for subsequent kinetic strikes. FPV teams maneuvered through transmission corridors, visually tracing the signal cables feeding directly into the Borisogledsk II complex. As this ground reconnaissance unfolded, portable Ukrainian electronic warfare jammers activated, generating powerful waves of interference specifically targeted at the facility's sensor arrays. The immediate effect of this electronic barrage was dramatic. Within minutes, Russian operators inside the complex reported flickering command links and intermittent voice channels. The jamming created massive blind spots in the Russian sensor grid, effectively isolating the facility electronically before any physical strikes had even landed. It's the military equivalent of cutting all phone lines and internet connections to a building before attempting to enter it. During this preparatory phase, Ukrainian mechanized units, including T-64BV main battle tanks, reportedly waited at concealed positions just outside visual range, prepared to exploit any vulnerabilities created by the electronic assault. Infantry squads established perimeters synchronized with live drone feeds, creating a coordinated picture of the battlefield that would have been impossible just years ago. Russian defensive systems in the sector didn't remain passive. Mobile Buk M3 surface-to-air missile launchers rotated to acquire targets, while Pantsir short-range point defense systems began tracking suspected drone signatures. Russian MiG-29 fighters and Mi-28 attack helicopters scrambled to patrol the airspace, initiating a complex aerial duel. But here's what's crucial to understand. Explosions didn't define this initial engagement. Instead, it became a contest of sensor versus counter-sensor, frequency against frequency. The first phase of the battle for the Borysoglebsk II complex had achieved electronic isolation, setting conditions for what would come next. As the initial jamming wave subsided, creating calculated gaps in the Russian command network, Ukrainian forces immediately escalated to the kinetic phase. This stage was defined by layered and precisely sequenced strikes that demonstrated remarkable operational sophistication. From staging areas reportedly 30 miles distant, Ukrainian M142 HIMARS batteries launched volleys of precision rockets. But the targets weren't personnel or hardened shelters. They were critical infrastructure nodes, power substations, communication relays, and radar facilities essential to Borysoglebsk II's continued operation. The strategic objective wasn't outright destruction, but physical disconnection of the facility from its supporting network. On the ground, Punisher drones conducted diving attacks in coordinated pairs, harassing Russian vehicle convoys attempting to reinforce the area and severing resupply routes before they could deliver critical equipment or personnel. Simultaneously, mine-laying robotic systems reportedly navigated drainage ditches to deploy sensor-triggered anti-vehicle mines along likely approach routes. This wasn't random harassment, it was designed to force Russian armored units to slow their response or reroute through less favorable terrain, buying Ukrainian forces additional operational time. Under this covering fire, the waiting T-64BV tanks advanced using smoke and terrain masking to conceal their movement. These tanks also functioned as mobile signal hubs, relaying targeting coordinates to the next wave of FPV drones, a remarkable integration of old and new military technology. High above the engagement area, Ukrainian Su-27 fighters maintained altitude at approximately 18,000 feet, using their radar pods to generate comprehensive three-dimensional maps of active Russian defenses. This data fed directly into the Ukrainian drone network, allowing rapid triangulation of any active Russian emitters within the compound. Once identified, these emitters became targets for airdropped cluster munitions from Punisher drones, effectively shredding antennas and short-circuiting exposed systems. Russia countered with its own sophisticated assets. Satellite feeds registered thermal signatures of Iskander tactical ballistic missile launchers activating, though their subsequent launches appeared aimed at suppressing Ukrainian launch sites rather than striking within the complex itself, suggesting concern about damaging their own infrastructure. The airspace became a dense electromagnetic storm as Russian Zala reconnaissance drones and Lancet loitering munitions deployed from hidden pads to hunt for Ukrainian control vehicles. Deeper within Russian lines, Zhetel R-330 electronic countermeasure systems, ground-based communications jammers, began activating, attempting to project concentric waves of interference to sever Ukrainian data links. Despite these robust countermeasures, Ukrainian forces appeared to maintain operational initiative. Their jammers reportedly shifted frequencies at rates that outpaced Russian automated countermeasures. The HIMARS batteries continued striking secondary infrastructure, fuel depots, backup servers, radar cooling towers. Within approximately 30 minutes of this phase beginning, the electronic output of the Borysoglebsk II complex had been assessed to have dimmed by over 50%, leaving a battlefield littered with burning transmitters and collapsed communication masts. Following the primary kinetic strikes, the engagement shifted almost entirely into the electronic spectrum. This phase was defined by sophisticated deception operations designed to shatter Russian situational awareness. Specialized Ukrainian electronic warfare UAVs released swarms of micro-emitters, small airborne pods broadcasting false radar signatures across a 10-mile radius. On Russian radar screens, these decoys reportedly simulated dozens of phantom convoys and armor columns where none actually existed. This aerial deception was augmented by ground-based electronic decoys and mobile jamming trucks, which together generated a dense electronic fog. This was a direct attempt to blind advanced Russian systems like the Nebo-M long-range radar arrays, whose operators suddenly saw their scopes flooded with static and false returns, making targeting solutions impossible. Amidst this engineered chaos, Ukrainian command and control links reportedly remained secure and encrypted. Ukrainian signals intelligence crews used rapid frequency hopping techniques, shifting channels every few milliseconds to stay ahead of Russian trace and jam algorithms. The objective had shifted from physical destruction to cognitive control, freezing the Russian military's ability to observe, orient, decide, and act. This is modern warfare at its most sophisticated, not destroying the enemy's ability to fight, but destroying their ability to understand what's happening around them. As Russian sensors flickered and the electronic fog partially receded, Ukrainian forces seized the window of opportunity to begin a limited mechanized ground assault. This wasn't brute force, it was a calculated advance exploiting previously established electronic superiority. T-64 BV tanks advanced in low-profile spear formations, navigating routes pre-scouted by drones and robotic ground scouts. Dismounted infantry squads moved in close support, using gaps in sensor coverage that the jammers had created. Remote systems maintained pressure on Russian supply nodes from standoff distances. HIMARS and self-propelled artillery units delivered precision fire, shaping the engagement by suppressing hardened Russian emplacements and interdicting resupply lanes. The emphasis remained surgical and staged. First degrade, then isolate, finally occupy key nodes of the electronic warfare complex. Russian defenders responded with localized, hardened defenses. T-90M tank crews established static positions while Mi-28 helicopters circled at low altitude to deny easy avenues of approach. Russian forces launched small, disciplined counterattacks against Ukrainian flanks, attempting to funnel attackers into prepared kill zones. These probes met coordinated Ukrainian fire and rapid repositioning. Meanwhile, Russian electronic warfare vans and mobile jamming stations strained to restore coherent command networks. Operators rerouted signals, patched fiber splices, and activated short-range repeaters where primary links had been severed. The engagement resembled a layered chess match where every physical maneuver was mirrored by an electronic countermove. The successful degradation of the Borisogledsk II complex caused cascading failures that rippled far beyond the immediate battlefield. The disruption of this primary routing hub had profound implications for the entire air defense architecture around Moscow. Overlapping air defense umbrellas, once seamless, now required immediate reconfiguration. SAM batteries were reportedly pulled from scheduled positions and repositioned dozens of miles to plug newly perceived gaps in coverage. Logistical operations slowed significantly. Convoys carrying fuel and spare parts stalled at checkpoints as commanders struggled to verify identities and re-authenticate orders over unreliable networks. Backup command centers intended for seamless substitution were flooded with stale data and began issuing conflicting orders. The cohesive Russian command mesh fragmented into a patchwork of isolated nodes. The tempo of Russian response slowed by an order of magnitude. Following several hours of sustained electronic attrition and precision strikes, both sides began recalibrating. Ukrainian forces consolidated control over disrupted network nodes, securing digital corridors before withdrawing mobile units to safer staging areas. Combat engineers deployed retrieval robots to catalog damaged electronics and ensure no volatile systems remained active. By first light, the battlefield had largely gone quiet. The primary mission objective had been achieved. The Borisogledsk II Electronic Warfare Center was effectively blinded, its primary command channels severed, its influence on Moscow's regional network significantly degraded. What remained was systemic silence. Russia's network, valued at over $4.5 billion, must now be rebuilt from fragments, a process assessed to be significantly slower and costlier than the original construction, permanently degrading the coherence of regional defense. This operation represents the future of warfare, precise, surgical, focused on networks rather than annihilation. The question isn't whether this approach works. The smoldering remains of a $4.5 billion facility answer that definitively. The question is how many other critical nodes remain vulnerable to this same systematic dismantling.